Hey everyone, it's Brian DeVore, host of Real Divorce Talk. We're glad you could join us again today for another edition of Real Divorce Talk, where we talk about everything you need to know about divorce. Lots of different issues that go along with divorce. For those of you who know, who've seen the show before, I've gone through my own divorce, and sort of out of that experience was born this show. Jamie Shapiro, who is my normal host along with me, is not here today. She's on location. She's doing a talk at a senior community, part of another business that we do together. So we have some wonderful guests here today. We're going to be talking a lot about different aspects of divorce. We're going to have a test case so we can kind of give an example of what someone might go through in the different stages of divorce and the professionals that they need involved on their side to help them out. The second part of our show, we're going to have another guest talking about co-parenting, because that's a big issue when it comes to divorce. Knock on wood, in my divorce it hasn't been, but I know for a lot of people it is. Don't forget, we are live, so we want your comments, we want your questions. So as the professionals are giving out their information, their opinions, and their ideas, if you have questions about it, comments, please don't hesitate to put them on there. We'll try to get on as many as we possibly can. Again, we're glad that you joined us today. Brian DeVore and with Divorce Home Solutions, and we'll kind of get started by introducing my co-host, Eric Billock. How you doing, Eric?
I'm doing fine.
Good.
Happy to be here.
So Eric is our co-host for usually the first segment of our show. Eric is with High Tech Lending, specializing in helping people who are going through divorce with the mortgage. Is that correct?
Absolutely.
Great. So tell us just kind of briefly your role in that process.
Just real briefly, kind of get called in to the process when there's a marital home involved and one person wants to, refinance that home to buy out one spouse, or they might be selling the home and, be looking at financing to purchase a new home after they sell the marital home. And so we can kind of help with structuring their marital settlement agreement, based on how much support they receive or how much support they're going to pay to make sure that both parties can succeed post-decree.
Yeah, and it sounds somewhat simple, but it's really not. There's so much that goes into it, and there are a lot of different lenders out there, but it really takes someone who knows what they're doing in this space, who can really make sure that it doesn't go sideways. So I'm grateful to have Eric here as my co-host.
Happy to be here.
Great, and we'll go ahead and get started introducing our guests, and then we'll get into our panel. First guest is Kim Werner, and Kim Werner is the program manager for Divorce Mediation Group, which is part of the National Conflict Resolution Center. Kim, how are you?
Hi, fine, Brian. Thank you for having us.
Very welcome. Thank you for joining us.
Sure.
Next we have, I'm going to say Barbara Normal, just because if it's a joke from the emails we have going back and forth. Her real name is Barbara Norman. She is a CDFA, which we've talked about on the show before, is a certified divorce financial analyst, someone who specializes in the money side of divorce. She's also a CFP, and she's also the founder, I want to make sure I get this right, of the Women's Financial Academy.
That's right.
Welcome, Barbara.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me.
My pleasure. Thank you. And last but certainly not least in the divorce process is Colleen Warren. Colleen is a certified legal specialist in family law, so she is a divorce attorney. And as we all know, the law can be really tricky when it comes to divorce. You need to have someone on your side. So Colleen is here as well. How are you?
Thank you. I'm well. Thank you for having me.
Great. So, like I said, we're going to do a little test case. But before we do the test case, I just want to give our guests an opportunity to say a little bit about what they do and their specialties, so it makes more sense when we do the test case. So, Kim, tell us a little bit about your role and what Divorce Mediation Group is all about.
Yeah, thank you. As the name implies, Divorce Mediation Group handles all aspects of divorce mediation. We work with people that are going through their divorce. We work with people in post-divorce matters. We work with unmarried parents in paternity and child custody and child support matters. Basically, any family law matter that you can work out in court, we can do it in mediation. I'm the program manager. I do all intake. I meet with all clients before they begin the process. I help them choose a mediator. We get their session scheduled, and I basically shepherd their case through from start to finish. And it's really rewarding work, and it's very, very it's rewarding when people can mediate their divorce as opposed to litigate their divorce. So that's our goal, is to help people get through their divorce as efficiently and cost effectively as possible.
Absolutely. I know personal experience, I went through mediation for my divorce. Certainly it was a lot friendlier way to do it.
Absolutely.
A lot more collaborative way to do it. I think it went well because of that. So thank you for lending your expertise. You're going to be sort of the gatekeeper and the starter of this segment here, so we'll get to you back in just a moment.
Of course. Thank you.
Barbara, tell us a little about yourself and how you got into what you do and your role.
Fresh out of college, I started with the insurance industry and didn't like it so much, but grew up through the financial services. My dad was a tax preparer. We I don't know, we had taxes over the breakfast table. And so it just
That sounds like a great thing to do at breakfast time.
But as a certified divorce financial analyst, my goal is to run 2 financial plans and to put the options into place so that people can see what they're doing. Because I think that divorce is very emotional and people make decisions emotionally, but then down the road there may be some implications that are tax implications, capital gains, retirement. So what we want to do is kind of get a roadmap for both spouses that works. And I think that my job is to put those options on the table. It's their job to vote, but at least they know what they're voting on.
Makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
And I always thought, I never knew about that there was even there's even a certified divorce financial analyst when I went through my own divorce. But it's so important, especially when you have complex situations and retirement plans, which we'll talk about in our test case. So thank you very much for joining us and lending us your expertise.
Thank you.
All right, Colleen, tell us how you got into the wide world of family law.
Well, I started after college. I decided that I wanted to go to law school. Thought I better check this out before I commit to 3 years of my life, and worked in family law for 2 years. Decided that was the craziest area of law that could possibly exist, because not only do we deal with civil law and evidence, we deal with the family code, and sometimes criminal comes into play and a lot of other things. I said, I'm never going to do that. I left for law school, did tax, and was bored. And I thought, I need a little more crazy in my life. So
There you go. You got the right place.
I found my home. So I've been practicing about 12 years and became a certified specialist in 2006. So my practice is solely in family law, and I deal primarily with high conflict custody cases and high conflict financial issues. So that's where my specialty lies.
Got it. Sounds like a lot of fun.
Always.
Again, thankfully mine wasn't that crazy as well, but that's good. But there are a lot that are. And the example we're going to be giving today, it's definitely, I would say it's one of the more complex cases. Maybe not. There's a lot of complex cases out there. So we're going to just jump right into it. And here's our test case. And we sort of roundtabled what this case might look like. All right, so meet John and Mary Smith. So if your names are John and Mary Smith, I apologize ahead of time. They've been married for 21 years, and the length of marriage is important, which we'll get to. John, and they're contemplating divorce. Here's the details. John works for High Tech Inc. He has a wonderful 401k plan, and it includes stock options. Mary is a professor at Smart University. That name's not so good. I should have done something different. It has a great pension plan. They have 3 children ages 5, 16, and 19. They own a home that they purchased together while they were married. John contributed part of the down payment from an inheritance he received when his grandfather passed away. Mary contributed part of the down payment from the sale of a condo she owned prior to their marriage. Mary would like to remain in the home until the youngest child graduates from high school. All right, so we're going to assume for the sake of argument that they're calling Kim to start mediation, or at least they think they want to maybe look at mediation. Mm-hmm. Kim, talk to us about this.
Well, let's say that John and Mary have decided to move forward with mediation. And one of the first things we would do is sort of triage their case. Now, you mentioned a lot of things that check a lot of boxes when a case begins. For instance, John has a 401k with stock options also. In the event that that 401k has to be divided, then they have to work with someone who prepares a special order that addresses that issue specifically. So we would direct them to that specialist in the beginning of their matter so they can get that document started, and that specialist would work with the mediator or the attorney drafting their marital settlement agreement to ensure that the language in the order is the same as the language in the marital settlement agreement. They have a home, and it sounds like with the factors you gave us, it's a community property home, but that home was acquired by way of each party contributing their separate property assets. So in dismantling something like that, there are a couple of things that the parties may want to look at. They may want to do something called a Moore-Marsden calculation, and I'll let Colleen address that more specifically. And they may want to look at the Family Code 2640 factors, which deals with parties being reimbursed for their separate property that they contributed to the acquisition of a community property asset. So with those kind of complicated things at the beginning, we always recommend that they work with a family law attorney who can analyze their issues a little bit more closely, and recommend that they meet with a professional to do those calculations if that's needed. It also says Mary wants to stay in the home with the kids. Now, what does that mean? Does Mary eventually want to buy out John's interest in the house? If so, is Mary going to qualify for a loan? That's where it would behoove Mary to speak to someone like Eric at the very beginning of their matter, because you don't want to get to the end of your divorce and all of a sudden realize you don't qualify for a loan to buy out the equity in your spouse's in the family residence if that's the agreement you've reached. Stock options. Stock options are kind of they can be a very complicated issue. They often need to be valued, and I'm going to hand that over to Barbara, but that is something that we would recommend they work with a certified divorce financial analyst to value those options. That's an asset that's going to eventually be divided as part of the divorce process. We need to find out what those are worth. The 401k and Mary's pension both need to be divided by an order called a domestic relations order. Again, that specialist would have to be brought on to prepare that. And we're also looking at some child support. They have a very young child. They have a 5-year-old, and we're looking at 13 more years of child support. And John and Mary, since they've been married for 21 years, I'm going to assume they're probably in their 40s, mid-40s, maybe late 40s. And if one party's going to be paying child support for that many years, that's a long time to pay child support. They may want to look into acquiring a life insurance policy to protect that insurance. I'm sorry, to protect that support in the event that John passes away early and cannot continue paying the child support payments. So they would talk to an insurance specialist about something like that. And then what we also do is anytime anyone comes in for mediation, we always suggest they get the advice of an attorney. Our mediators are family law attorneys, but in the mediation process they are neutral and cannot give legal advice, so we always recommend they work with someone like Colleen at some point during their matter, whether they get some advice before they begin mediation or they discover halfway through the process that maybe mediation is stalling, and it might help to have Colleen and another attorney present during the mediation to make things move along more smoothly. And we especially recommend people work with an attorney when their marital settlement agreement is drafted. We really encourage them to have that reviewed by an attorney, someone who will advocate for their best interests and give them some ideas for possible revisions or maybe some changes that may be needed to the document. So basically what we do in mediation is triage. We determine at the very beginning what kind of professionals you're going to need to work with, if any. Some matters are very simple and don't require this. Some matters are very complex and can use everyone on this stage. And so that's what we like to do at the beginning. And then we have people that we recommend. All of these people sitting here are on our referral list that we hand to people, and then they're free to pursue, whatever services they might need outside of the mediation.
I'm exhausted.
And that's just at the very beginning.
And that's just
of the
very
matter.
beginning, right?
Right.
So when you have John and Mary to contemplating divorce, they didn't realize probably it would be that complex.
Right.
There's a lot of situations I hear when people come in and like, oh, we're just going to do this. We'll just take the money from the retirement to offset the amount that I'm getting for the house and so forth. And it's just so much more complicated than
Right.
that. And so who would you go to first? Barbara, Colleen?
Well, always Colleen. Colleen,
Okay.
I always keep Colleen in my back pocket, okay, for any legal questions, any advice that the parties need. But for that instance that you just described, I would recommend that they work with Barbara.
Okay.
That's immediately something you want to do at the very beginning. I would say you need to speak to a CDFA on that, and I know a good one.
Got it.
Talk to
All
her.
right, so for each of you, let's talk about the case and specifically where you would look to address, what are the things that you could help out with to make this divorce as easy as you possibly could. Barbara?
So here's where the dance begins. We've got two people who have kids, but there's some pretty complex issues here. Mary wants to keep the house. There's some unique provisions if she gets half of John's 401k. There's a unique provision that may allow her to take some of that 401k money and not pay a 10% penalty on that for early withdrawal. But if she is entitled to half of his 401k, rolls it into an IRA, and then tries to take that money to buy John out of the house, she's muddied the waters. She's going to pay 10% federal penalty, 3% state penalty. So there's a timing. We can get some money out of that 401k maybe to help her with the house. But then the next question becomes, is that the smartest thing? We have a lot of things going on. Mary has a pension that needs to be valued. Did Mary work for this university before getting married? Because then she's going to have some of that's going to be separate. So we have to value her pension. We also have to value that 401k. Now this one is complex because it might have some company stock in it, and that's not just a pre-tax asset anymore. There's this thing called net unrealized appreciation that might allow them to take that money out down the road at capital gains rather than at ordinary income. Now we're not talking about apples to apples at all. And so we look at what are some of the best tax strategies to use, what are the goals, and what makes sense. And so when I said now the dance begins, we maybe put the numbers on the table and everybody goes, oh, no, we're not going to do that. And then we just start adjusting until hopefully we can find something that makes sense. But in the meantime, they're also talking with attorneys about how do I split this up. So,
Well, I think that's one of the important things is that involving an attorney early, you can pay me to do much of that analysis. You can pay me to figure out the whole of your estate. But what you really need to know is, can I sustain the assets that I'm going to get? And am I getting a fair and equitable settlement? So like Barbara used in the example of the stock option, or excuse me, the 401k, you're not trading post-tax and pre-tax dollars. In mediation, we can work some of those things out. But when you come and see an attorney from the outset, if you have a mediation-minded attorney, settlement-minded attorney, we might try to hire a joint CDFA. We might say, hey, you guys both need to call Eric and figure out what we're going to do with the house. Otherwise, you have to start marshaling your own discovery and your own information. And in a lot of cases, that ends up having one person has that information, the other person has that information. We either try to come together in an agreement or court, and we don't have it match up. So from the outset of a case, I think it's really important to involve these professionals so that we're not duplicating the work, and you're doing it at presumably a rate that is lower than what an attorney charges for that rate. Sometimes it's hard to explain that to clients, why, if I'm coming to an attorney, why do I need to hire someone else? And there's two very good reasons. One that I've already mentioned, it's usually less costly than an attorney doing the work. And you have to remember that your attorney can't testify in court. They cannot testify as to the value of something. I can do the calculation, but I can't then use it. So it's really important to involve professionals early on. It saves time and money and confusion, quite frankly.
Now, one of the issues that we kind of talked about, and I purposely put this in, was where the funds came from for the family home. So who wants to kind of touch on that a little bit and how you deconstruct that?
I can talk about it a little bit. So when we're talking about community property residence, which is what the scenario says, so it's purchased during the marriage. Each party is bringing in money from a separate source. You have to be able to trace that money back to the individual separate source. And then depending on how it was acquired, there's either going to be what's called a more Marsden calculation, which calculates the community's interest in a separate property asset, or have a what's called Family Code Section 2640 claim of separate property contribution to a community property asset. Those two things are very different from one another. One includes appreciation, or can include appreciation, while the other, Family Code Section 2640, does not include appreciation. People's expectations can be very different from one another. You figure, I included my separate property. For John and Mary, they acquired a community property asset with separate property. That would be a simple, quote unquote simple, 2640 claim versus a much more complicated, more Marsden, based just on the facts that I have now. Of course, things are way more complicated, which again is why you would want to involve someone like Barbara to come in and do that calculation for you. Because the court is, if you're not mediating, if you're not settling, the court requires that calculation to be done.
Got it.
Yeah.
I remember hearing, Barbara, one time someone talking about being a CDFA. You know, you hire the attorneys to figure out how you're going to divide the pie, but you need the CDFA to figure out what that pie is. So looking at this case here, you would take into account, all these things. What else? What money they have in their accounts? What do you look at as far as putting that pie together?
It's really goal driven. So what do I look at in that pie is not only what is the asset, but like Colleen said, how long is it going to sustain us? Like, I could get the house, but am I going to have to sell that when my youngest is out of college, and at what capital gains rate, and am I ever going to be able to retire? And so we take the long view of what are the gains, what are the taxes going to look like, what is my retirement going to look like. But also, you've got two kids here, one that looks like it could be in college, one approaching college, and one really young. And let's face it, the kids are going to be kind of a train wreck in this. And who's going to pay for their college? And are we going to be so selfish in keeping those assets? Like, how do we consider these other things too? And so it's really a broad, long view picture that I'm trying to take. of let's take the emotion out of it, let's treat it like a business, and let's see how you're going to get on with your life and how you're going to afford to do that.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Eric, so she wants to stay in the home. What are some of the things that you're going to look at and consider with the MSA to determine if that's even possible?
Well, since she's working at the university, I mean, first thing we'll do is look at her income coming off of that employment situation to see if she could qualify for, refinancing the home. We'd also have to figure out, again, kind of getting feedback, from the other people involved, how much she's going to have to buy them out of the home, or they're going to trade other assets, or is she going to have to pull equity out of the home to buy them out of the house. And then so again, we figure out what the loan amount is, then we figure out what income we have, and if her income is sufficient, then we would look to complete the financing before they filed for the divorce. But say she didn't have enough income coming off of her employment as being a professor, she's going to receive child support. Not sure if she'd be paying spousal support or if she's going to be receiving it, but as far as child support goes, we'd be giving feedback on how much child support might be needed and for how long before the financing can be obtained. And so in that case, it would be something that probably happened more post-decree once everything was final.
Got it. Okay, so we're out of time in this segment, but there's so much more we could talk about. So we encourage you to post your questions, post your comments on the site. These professionals who are up here right now are happy to answer those questions for you ongoing. They'll be looking on the site to take a look and see if anyone else has any questions, what other things, other resources they can recommend. Eric, how can people reach you if they want more information about what you do?
I am old school, best way is call me. 760-476-3127.
Great. And Kim?
Yeah, me too. My phone number is area code 619-238-2400, extension 223. That goes right to my desk, and we can talk about mediation. I offer consultations. We have some great workshops, all sorts of ways to get information.
Great, thank you. Barbara?
Mm-hmm.
So I think Women's Financial Academy website is the best way, just www.Women's Financial Academy. You can go on, you can ask a question. We are a nonprofit foundation, and the classes are all donation-based, so we are really here to help and to serve. So don't be afraid to pick up the phone or go on the website and ask.
And that's womensfinancialacademy.com?
.com.
.com. Got it. Colleen?
And for me, I'm a combination of old school. My office, you can call at 858-275-2055, or my website, which is warrenfamilylawfirm.com.
Got it. Thank you, everybody, for joining me. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And also, too, we're going to have links to all their websites and their information on the Real Divorce Talk Facebook page. So if you didn't catch that, you can always look back on it, but we'll have those links as well. While my guests step off and the next guests come on, we'll talk briefly about what it is that I do and help people, and Jamie as well. So we operate Divorce Home Solutions. If in a divorce, someone's moving, someone has to leave the home. And so what we try to do is take some of the pressure and some of those issues away from people as they're going through divorce and help with everything about the home. We'll help the couple sort of divide the belongings, figure out what they want to keep, what they don't want to keep, what each person wants, space plan for where they're going to be moving to, and help them throughout the entire transition along the way, whether they're both moving or one is moving. As a real estate agent, I help them with the sale of the home if they need to sell their home or buy a home, etc. And whenever I help someone, a divorcing couple, either sell a home or buy a home or both, then all those other services are going to be included for free. So it's a way for me to give back, and Jamie, my partner as well, who's also gone through her own divorce, to make sure that people who are going through the divorce process, which is a stressful and emotional process, takes some of the stress away as they're going through the divorce. So as I mentioned during the test case, my divorce went, I think, relatively smoothly. One of the reasons why is because we always put our kids first. And that was something that she and I both made the decision early on. Our children are now 15 and 17. I can't believe that. And so, but I know there's a lot of situations where people have a very difficult time co-parenting. You're trying to co-parent with someone who probably the relationship isn't so good, the communication has broken down, and now you have to communicate with this person who no longer lives under the same roof with you. So there's a lot of issues that go into it. I'm really excited because there's an organization in San Diego that can really help with that. So coming on the stage now, I'm very pleased to be joined by Lynn Waldman, who is my co-host for this segment, and Tina Mears. And Tina is with, I'm going to get it wrong again. Hold on.
Parenting.
Thank you, Cooperative Parenting San Diego. So, Lynn, how you doing?
I'm good, thank
It's been
you.
a while since I've seen you.
Yes.
You weren't able to come on the last show.
Yeah, I'm glad to be co-hosting with you today, Brian.
Very good. And Tina's a friend of yours, so you guys
She
know
is.
each other for a little while through the collaborative divorce. So we'll kind of talk about that a little bit. So Lynn is a divorce therapist.
Yes.
And also she's the president of the collaborative group. So tell us a little bit about what collaborative is and then how you got involved in what you do.
Okay, so it's the Collaborative Family Law Group of San Diego, and it's a very client-centered, family-centered way for people to go through divorce. And I know that sounds a little bit counterintuitive, but it's a client-driven process. And so I'm a divorce coach, and Tina is also a divorce coach. So we are the mental health component. So each client would have an attorney that's giving them advice. Each client has a divorce coach that's helping them with the emotional aspects and communication part of divorce. Because as we know, divorce is legal and financial, and it's also emotional. And the emotions are often what derails the divorce. So, so that's what we do, and Tina is also a divorce coach. And you've been in collaborative about 3 years now, Tina, would
About
you say?
3 years.
Yes, yeah. And what is your take on collaborative divorce as a divorce coach?
I think it's a wonderful process to try to keep the divorce out of the court system, which is more time and more money and just more trauma going through that, and then putting your kids through that too could be a lot more difficult. So what collaborative divorce does is we really wrap around the couple getting divorced with support, education, and just really being there for them. And it's to me, it's the way to go, because they know, they feel safe, they feel heard, and we really try to make it a win-win for the couple.
Right.
Yeah.
You know, part of the problem, well, there's a lot of issues with divorce, but one of the biggest issues is you're having to make the biggest financial decisions of your life and the biggest legal decisions of your life while you're going through, if not the most emotionally turbulent time of your life, or maybe the second behind a death. Except in a death, the person's gone, but now if you're co-parenting, you're still dealing with that person. It's a lot of trying emotional time. So it's great to have a divorce coach, a mental health professional, who can really help you along the way. It makes a big difference. And I've heard Lynn talk before in some of the work that she does in the collaborative group. The first Monday of each month, Saturday of each month,
The first
you have the
Saturday.
divorce options.
Yes, we have Divorce Options, which is a 3-hour workshop, and it's presented by one of our family law attorneys, a divorce coach, and we have a certified divorce financial analyst, and it's from 9 in the morning till noon, and we go over what your choices are in getting divorced. How you get divorced matters, and we talk about do-it-yourself, litigation, mediation, and collaborative divorce, because we want clients to choose what's really going to work for them and to be educated and to know their best options.
Right, for sure. So let's talk about cooperative parenting. And like I said, you're trying to co-parent with this person and you rather have them move to Mars, but that doesn't work. So talk to us about cooperative parenting. How did you get involved and what it's all about?
Sure. So I was approached by Sherry Delisle, who started the program quite a few years ago, to start facilitating some of the groups, which I did for a few years, and then took over the program as director. And so I run the groups and really want as many people to know about the program as possible, because when people come in, they are scared, they don't want to sit in another class, and what they find out with a group setting is that there's so much support in the group already. There's already so much wisdom, and so we have a educational material that we walk through, and we have the subject areas, learning how to communicate with your co-parent, how to deal with somebody that you wish was at Mars, how to keep kids out of the middle, because that's such an important piece of keeping all eyes on the kids, and just reminding them that they can only look at themselves and that you cannot change somebody else's behavior.
Right. That's very important. Yeah. And I know that because people say, if only he did that, if only she listened to that. And you can't change that. You can't direct them. Right. And I know it's a struggle. Some of the friends I have who've gone through divorce where they don't like the way that parent provides food for the children, or their time they go to bed and all those things. So I think it's wonderful, some of the work you do. What are these groups like? How big are the groups? How does that work?
Sure. Anywhere from 6 to 15, depending on the month. It ebbs and flows. It's 3 classes with a total of 7.5 hours each.
We are approved by the courts from low to high conflict, and I do give a certificate of completion at the end that they can then file with the courts or keep for themselves.
Got it. What do parents do when they have different parenting styles, like we talked about? One's a yeller, one is more compassionate. What do they do in that situation?
Ideally, we encourage parents to communicate with each other, to be able to pick up the phone, send an email, invite the other parent into a conversation about how can we be as consistent as possible with our kids. But we do know that that's sometimes not possible. If either one or both parents aren't ready for that kind of dynamic, they don't get on the phone. They don't send emails. So it's a struggle. And so then we look towards acceptance, and that's hard. It takes a lot of practice, but really realizing that you don't have any control of that other person, no matter how many times you ask or how loud you scream. We cannot get someone to change who they are if they don't want to, if they're unwilling to. And so it's really looking at yourself and what are the changes you can make to create more peace within the relationship and decrease the conflict.
That must be so empowering for people when they realize that, I just don't have control over Brian feeding his kids McDonald's or, letting them stay up till midnight. That must be such relief for people, to take the burden off trying to change someone and, having those expectations. I would imagine you see quite a few success stories.
I do, and that's exactly the word that they use. Towards the middle of the class, they come back and say, it just feels so relieving that I don't have to get so angry because they've now tuned into their response to what has been triggering them and really made an intentional decision to respond in a more effective and healthy way. And you don't have to fight if you don't want to fight. You have to learn how to manage yourself and hold that and take care of yourself through this time. But once you learn it and get it and you practice it, that other person can be exactly who they are and you can still be okay.
Yes.
One of the things that I remember hearing is a lot of times people will bring the kids into the middle of the situation, whether it's to lean on them for emotional support or to get back at the other person. Yeah. But I remember one thing someone once told me is you have to remember that child is half you and half the other parent. So if you do that with the child, you talk about how bad the other parent is, what the child is really hearing is, I'm bad because I'm part of that parent.
Right.
So in some of the classes that you do you see issues like that come up, or what are some of the issues that come up that you've seen sort of turn around a little bit?
We absolutely see issues like that, and sometimes the parents don't even know they're doing it, and so it's kind of an eye opener for them of the ground rules or the what not to do's. Is they see that, oh wow, I didn't even know I was doing that, or it was affecting my children that way. So that's one of the biggest shifts that we see, is that we get so stuck in our adult brain of the stress and trying to figuring out this co-parenting thing out, and the realization that these children are caught in the middle and we don't know how they're feeling because we're not asking them because we're so consumed with our stress, to tune into that and be able to compartmentalize the adult stuff over here so that we can really be present for our children.
And do parents come back to you after they've participated in cooperative parenting and say, wow, I really see a change in my child's behavior?
Not after. So I do have some repeat customers sometimes, but usually towards the end of the 3-week course, they're already saying, oh my gosh, I just wasn't aware, or I've now changed how I talk and help our children open up more, and it's a wonderful change for them.
And I bet that really solidifies what they've learned, because when they see change in their children's behavior or their children doing better, then they can really see the benefit of cooperative parenting.
Yeah, and the other thing that happens is our kids tell us what they need, but if we're not listening, we don't recognize it because we're stuck up in our adult brain. But if we're watching, they're very much telling us in their facial expression, in their behavior. And so when we tune into that and notice it, then we go, oh yeah, you're showing me right now. Okay, I get it. I get, and that conversation starts.
Yeah.
I think we have to remember that the kids didn't ask for this.
No.
They're not the ones who have issues they're adult issues, and the kids are the collateral damage. And I totally get that. Do you do anything differently depending on how old the children are? Do you have certain age groups in each group, or how does that work?
Well, I only work with the adults.
Oh, okay, that's right. Okay.
Right, and it's only one parent per group.
Got it.
Typically, the conflict is a little high for both parents to sit in the class together. And it's really hard to look at yourself and reflect on your own mistakes and look at those changes you want to make when the person that is sitting next to you that you're in conflict with.
Right.
But we speak to the parents about whatever age their child is. We've broken down some of the emotional responses from children according to age so they can identify with, and then we can have a discussion about how to address a 2-year-old versus a 15-year-old. It's going to be a little different.
Yeah.
Is it any different if it's a minor child versus, there are people getting divorced whose children are 21 and 23, and they're not co-parenting necessarily, but they're still both co-parents. Do you have any of that situation?
At times, for sure, and that really depends on the child. At that point, that child knows, I'm good. I'm not part of that. I don't want to be, and I'm doing my own life. But certainly, there's times when that adult child is still being pulled in, and how to release them, allow them to live their
Right.
own life.
So talk to us about your role in the collaborative process.
So I, like Lynn, am a divorce coach. I'm the mental health professional. And so I have a client, and then the other divorce coach has the other party. And we really work on understanding what they need through the process, what their hopes are, what their fears are. How can we all sit in a room together and be able to communicate? So working on communication strategies, negotiation strategies. And it's all about reaching across the table and working together. So understanding what the other person might need as well, and how to help that, because we want to make it a win-win. So it takes a little time to understand what they need and what they want, what the other party needs and wants, and then working together with the attorneys and the financial specialists to create a process that they feel safe, they feel heard, and we can do what we can, and mostly in the child's best interests.
And I think that's one of the biggest pluses of the collaborative, is that we have so much transparency. And I would be thinking, what does Tina's client need? And she would be thinking, what does my client need? And working together to help them get to that point where they can resolve the issues.
Right.
So that transparency is a huge thing, and so much different than your typical litigated case would be.
And we're working together as a team, which paves the way for their future, because we're talking about co-parenting skills, the parenting plan. So what we set up today in terms of communication will help move forward as they share information about the kids, and holidays and vacations, which is now going to be different for them.
Right. And now also, too, I understand that in the collaborative process, you may have a coach or someone in there to advocate for the children, who's really looking out for the children. Talk to us a little bit about that situation.
So that's the child specialist role. And as a child specialist, we meet with the kids, we find out how things are going, we'll bring that information back to the team. We'd have like maybe a 5-way meeting with the coaches, the parents, and the child specialist, and let the parents know, where the child is at. The child will have a voice to feel heard a little bit, but it's still the adults making the decisions. It's important to validate the child's feelings and where they are, but the adults are still the ones in charge of coming up with a parenting plan.
How often do you see situations where the parents say, I had no idea my child felt that way? Does that happen?
It does happen. It does. And because divorce is trauma. It's trauma for the adults, it's trauma for the kids, because it changes our identity and who we thought we were and what we told ourselves about who we were and what we feel. So, so they're going through the transition too. And the more communicative and cooperative the parents are, the less trauma it is for the kids.
Right. You've probably seen, Tina, we talk about success stories, but when people first come to you, what percentage of them are, yes, I'm excited to be here and learn how to co-parent, and how many of them are like, I'd rather, what is there a percentage, can you say?
In the co-parenting
Yeah.
classes? I'd say it's about 50-50.
Is it?
Because we do get quite a few parents who voluntarily show up. There's some are required by the courts, and some come voluntarily, and those really want to be there and learn. But I would say it's about 50-50, but really towards the middle of class, they start going, I'm glad I'm here. Not only what they're learning, but they're realizing they're not alone. They're learning from other people. They're able to share parts of their story and get to express what this has been for them.
I was going to say, I bet at the end, 100% of them are happy they're there.
Yeah, right. Absolutely. And when it all comes down to it, they all want what's best for their children.
Right.
Yeah.
Both
Right.
parents want what's best, for, hopefully, want what's best for the child.
Yeah.
And eventually, they'll realize that.
Right.
Not always at first, but eventually will. Thank you very much for being here. Lynn, how can
welcome.
people reach you if they want more information about what you do?
They can reach me through my website, lynnwaldman.lcsw.com. I've got an online booking button right on my website, or give me a phone call. My
Perfect.
number's on my website.
Great. Tina?
Through my website as well, which is cooperativeparentingsd.com, so as in San Diego, so cooperativeparentingsd.com, or email me at tina@cooperativeparentingsd.com.
Great. And like with the other guests, we'll post their websites on the Real Divorce Talk Facebook page, so you can link right to them. We really appreciate you joining us for another edition of Real Divorce Talk. We had a lot of good stuff to talk about. Please feel free to post your comments, your questions, and we'll get back to you as well. Thank you again. We look forward to seeing you in the next edition of Real Divorce Talk.